Hey guys, before I get started, if you like this video, if you like this channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit those likes, tell your friends, share it, leave me a comment, whatever, do something. It helps people find this content, all right? So, with that out of the way, what I want to talk about today is the value of obedience when it comes to behavior modification. And this is a debate that has been raging on in dog training for a long time, and it seems to go in sort of pendulum swings. When I started out in this business, pretty much everything was obedience will solve all your problems, or most of them, and then there's specific problem solving techniques if it doesn't work. If you look at the Keeler book, which is one of the probably most controversial books in the history of dog training, but it was the first dog training book that I owned, and it was the one that shaped my career early on. And it gets a lot of flack. Most of that flack comes from its problem solving section, where a lot of fairly extreme corrections are offered. And when people want to criticize that particular method, they almost always jump right to some of the more uh, intense corrections that the problem solving section points out. And predictably, whenever somebody does that, defenders of the method will jump in and go, wait, you got to understand. Look at the first page of that problem solving section where the author says, if you haven't completed the 12-week obedience program, stop reading and go do that first. Because if you do that, you probably won't need this stuff. And so the answer, the defense there, the counter to the claim that these are really harsh and terrible punishments is that yes, they might very well be very harsh and very terrible, and they may be unpleasant, but we have done a lot to prepare the dog. And what we have left, the dogs we have left who are needing these, are serious behavior cases, and lesser methods aren't going to solve that problem. Now, we can debate whether that's true or not. And to be honest, I mean, to put my 2 cents in, I think I haven't used any of those techniques from the back of the book in, probably over a decade. So I think we can solve those problems without that. But, again, that was a book written, decades ago. So I'm not going to be too harsh about it. But the point I'm getting at is that back then, the theory was do obedience first, and that will solve your problems. And then recently, there's been a push towards pure behavior modification. This argument that obedience training doesn't really help if your dog is, has separation anxiety or is, destructive chewing or biting people or whatever. And I think that what has happened is we have changed the way we've done obedience in a very dramatic way. One of the things about the obedience, the way I learned it, was every command was seen as a character building exercise. Like the idea was not to just teach the dog to sit when we say sit, but to get the dog used to responding to our direction, to get the dog working for us and with us, to build a cooperative relationship. Or at least that was the idea. Now, it didn't always come out that way. Sometimes it was do it because I said so, and that's the way it's going to be. But that was sort of the ideal. If we're going to reach the pinnacle of what we could do, this was the idea, was to create a cooperative dog who understood his role in our family, in our lives, and fulfilled that role perfectly. And as positive training became more and more popular, as reward-based training became more and more popular, food-based and whatnot, what happened is people started to focus on individual commands, not commands interlocking with each other, but this is how I teach sit, this is how I teach down, this is how I teach come, this is how I teach heel. And none of those commands were necessarily related in any real way. Whereas if you look at, again, the example of the Keeler book, each command led into the next command. They were all integrated in a really comprehensive, enmeshing way. But as we start to isolate commands and make it all about this behavior in this context, we lose that ability to generalize to teach general ideas. So what you're going to find is that when you have a bunch of disparate pieces that are not part of a whole, there's this disunity, and those commands become very situational. In this situation, I do this. In this situation, I do that. And I think it lacks that global scale that that earlier obedience had, where the idea was to build a worldview through obedience. But even taking that out, I think that we can recover a lot of that, and I've been working hard to do that, and I think I'm doing a really good job. Softening my methods, using a lot more reward based, doing a lot to build a more cooperative rather than a competitive dog, all of this stuff, but also integrating everything in a way where one command, as I'm teaching, one command leads into the next, and they are sort of joined together to build a view in the dog of what the relationship with me and with his owners and with other people is supposed to look like. But leaving that aside, even if you're doing a very extreme isolation of teaching each behavior separately, what a lot of people don't realize about obedience training is at some point in time, it always comes down to impulse control. Now, this is the other thing that's we work on motivating dogs and motivating dogs and motivating dogs and try and get the dog that's most desirous to do the thing we want them to do. But the problem is they won't always want to do that thing. They may not hate it, but maybe they'd just rather stay in bed today, or maybe they'd rather be sniffing that patch of grass over there, or maybe they'd rather chase that deer than do the thing we want them to do. There will come a point in time where the dog has to decide to do what we want them to do, despite pressure to do the other thing. And when we train dogs, we use distractions to prepare the dog for that, and we proof them against distractions. We set distractions up, and we correct the dog, or we I correct the dog. Um, there's other strategies, I suppose, but what we do is we teach the dog. However we do it, we teach the dog how to not give in to that other temptation, and that is impulse control. That is the dog deliberately and willfully overriding one desire for another. And that is character. That is choice. But so the thing is when we talk about this, um, when I talk about this with clients, I have a dog who's, resource guarding or something like that, and I say we're going to start with obedience. They go, but that's not my problem. My problem is my dog is guarding, socks or whatever. But the in terms of like if it was a physical ability, I tell them the muscle that the dog uses to not break a stay or to not break focus on heel, that's the same muscle that he's going to have to use to not guard that thing when he kind of wants to. It's the same muscle he's going to use to not chase that deer when he kind of wants to. It's all about impulse control. And you don't learn to lift weights by lifting maximum weight. You learn to lift weights by starting with low weight, and you build and you build, and your maximum gets higher and higher. The same thing happens with impulse control. So we start with easy distractions to ignore. We build the resistance to those. Then we make distractions a little harder, make them stay a little longer, make them a little bit closer in proximity. The 3Ds: distance, duration, distraction. We keep adding and adding and adding as we build the dog up, and we proof against this level, and we make it a little harder. We get proof against this level, we make it a little harder. We keep making it systematically and very carefully, building the dog up so that the distractions are always challenging but never overwhelming. That's so important. Always challenging but never overwhelming. And then we just keep doing that, and before long, the dog's got all of this self-control, all of this ability to go, wait, I don't want to do that. And that's where we start to see it pay off. The easiest way, the most reliable way, the best way to build that is through obedience. And it doesn't have to be traditional obedience, by the way. It can be obedience in any context. Like teaching a dog to let go of a tug toy on cue, that's impulse control. That's a lot of impulse control. Teach them to not run after that ball until you tell them to go get it. That's impulse control. But those are all obedience things because you're calling on the dog to obey. Building in the habit of practice of responding to us quickly when we ask them to do something. And in the presence of distractions, it can only help your dog make good decisions when faced with other questions. Will it always solve your problems? No, it won't. Of course, it won't. Sometimes we have to do something extra. But that foundation of obedience is never a bad place to start. Like, again, I keep going back to Keeler, but one of my favorite lines from that book is there's no such thing as too much practice at being good. Obedience, well done obedience, gives your dog plenty of practice at making good choices. And the more you practice making good choices, the more likely he is to make good choices in the future. All right? So don't discount obedience. Will it solve everything? No. Will it help you solve everything? Yes, it will help. It can't not help. Even if you don't see the result right away, even if it doesn't show up right away, you are building the skills. You're building cooperation. You're building trust. You're building communication, a two-way street. You're creating a shared vocabulary with your dog. Your dog is practicing impulse control, self-regulation, executive function, whatever you want to call it. All of that stuff is part of the obedience process. So you're doing all of that. And all of that will have a positive effect on other efforts you implement to solve behavior problems. All right? So don't let anyone tell you obedience isn't important. It's super valuable. All right? So that's all I got for now. Like I said, if you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share it with your buddies, share it with your enemies. I don't care. But if you like it, spread the word far and wide. All right? And thanks for watching, and we will see you around.